Oh, hi there, how you doing? Lovely weather we're having. Yeah, if you focus real hard, you can almost see the dead people through the thick fog. Am I in hell? Purgatory? Chicago? It doesn't really matter because they don't understand the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline here either. Let this be a cautionary tale about setting your expectations too low. Pretty soon you start getting upset that too much good stuff is happening to you. Tone it back, guys, I've earned some disappointment. I've had so much fun sowing day and night, but nobody warned me I had to reap it all. I had a perfect head count of my chickens a few days ago, but then they hatched and well, that's a spreadsheet I won't ever use again. Don't know why I'm in an idiom mood today. Maybe because I'm the biggest idiom in the whole room. I had a chance to not talk about this franchise, and not only did I invite evil into my home, I let you all open the door. Have you seen what talking about Five Nights at Freddy's does to a person? Oh, you can name all the animatronics? Cool! Did you know that counts as aggravated assault? So how exactly do you handle the Five Nights at Freddy's storyline? I have some experience handling hornets' nests, that might help. Freddy fans are a different breed. Get the number of buttons on Nightmare Fredbear's chest wrong and you find out how easy it is to mail a pipe bomb. Hours and hours of theorizing go into making the most benign statements about this franchise, and anything less than rock-hard evidence is thrown right out. That makes it very hard for someone like me without encyclopedic knowledge of the franchise to keep up. And with encyclopedic knowledge, it turns out that's not enough. Everyone knows this plot is convoluted. When I said that I was going to tackle it, I didn't so much get support as I did an outpouring of grief. I think we need to step back for a second and realize something we all try to deny, but is undoubtedly true. We're all wrong. We're just varying degrees of wrong. Some of us are within inches of figuring it out. Some of us think Gregory is a robot. In a series as adverse to explanation as this one, we can only ever just vaguely gesture in the direction of concrete facts. If we just accept that there's only one guy with any correct answers, we can all be a lot happier. Oh, and before we get into things, let's reenact my favorite feel-good story, Fahrenheit 451, and burn these books. The devil owns a publishing company and he makes Five Nights at Freddy's books. If we start letting these things count for the canon of the games, we're gonna have to reckon with time-traveling ball pits and male impregnation a lot sooner than we would all like to. Fazgoo. You. Anyway, this is the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline as I choose to understand it. If I'm wrong, please let me know in as violent a way as possible how I'm wrong about a story that you are also definitely wrong about. So things start out peachy between business partners William Afton and Henry Emily, who work together on Fredbear's Family Diner. The restaurant succeeds in spite of its horrifying characters and manages to become a hit, getting merchandise, television shows, and has generally taken over a small rural American town. It's so successful, it manages to franchise out to a secondary location, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Oh sure, Grimace can't get his own restaurant, but Freddy gets one. Not everything's perfect in Pizza Paradise, however, as William Afton has 3 whole children, all of whom will be dead within the next 2 weeks. There's eldest brother Michael, middle daughter Elizabeth, and runt of the litter Crying Child. He's one of the most important characters in the entire story, and these lazy bums still haven't named him. He's terrified of the pizzeria because he has a functioning brain and doesn't want to go. Unfortunately for him, since his dad owns the restaurant, he can rent it out for free, and that's where his birthday party's gonna be. Using that fact, his older brother Michael decides to torment him by screaming in his face. He's not even clever about it, that's what I'm upset about. Crying Child's only friend in the whole wide world is his dad, who talks to him through a plush with a walkie-talkie in it because he's too busy making psycho murder robots from the future in his underground laboratory. Also, either William Afton built the plushie to scurry around town behind Crying Child whenever he's not looking, or he's planted upwards of 30 or 40 plushies all around this small town. Not only is he being tormented by his older brother in the real world, he's also getting his ass beat in the dream world too, because every night he's tormented by nightmares of Freddy and the gang. I know there's a lot of debate over who the main character of this game is, but if it's Michael, who I peg as maybe 14 or 15, why does he still have playphones and robots all over the ground? And why is he at eye level with the doorknob? Oh, his room doesn't line up with the one from the in-between night minigames? Motherfucker, none of them do. So you spend night after night being hunted down by spike mares and spend day after day getting thrown into toilets. Life sucks! That's all until night 5, and with the big day just one sleep away, Freddy and his friends hit the bricks as Big Bad Fredbear comes to take a bite out of you. Then on day 5, he really takes a bite out of you. Michael and his friends drag Crying Child to a makeshift guillotine by shoving him into Fredbear's mouth until he splits like a watermelon. Then going forward, night 6 and Nightmare Mode have you playing as Michael since you just recreated a Gallagher bit with your baby brother's skull and you start feeling a little guilty. Oh, and these 3? The other 3 that are responsible for killing Crying Child? Yeah, they kinda just get on with their lives. Stop moping. Crying Child's death hits the whole family hard. Michael is traumatized, Afton goes bananas, the wife does nothing, and impressionable young Elizabeth thinks that getting murdered by robots is a cool thing to do now. Since he's business partners with Henry Emily, Afton decides to throw all the blame onto him for a robot cracking his son's head like a walnut. Out of retribution, Afton traps Henry's daughter Charlotte outside the other location, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and chokeslams her so hard that she splits in half. While all this is happening, the security puppet that watches over the place is undone because somebody put a box on top of the box that it lives in. This was the only line of defense for the entire building. The puppet's noble soul lets it crawl out to its own death to comfort this dead or dying child as Charlotte ends up possessing the puppet. Or if later in the series is to be believed, she coughed up some remnant into its mouth. Since this is the same puppet that is used throughout the whole series, it's safe to assume that some guy had to go out into the alleyway, kick the dead kid off the puppet, and toss it back in its box. This starts a trend of people in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe being horrible at spotting dead bodies. As if the night couldn't get any worse, on his way back home from his first intentional murder, Afton finds out he's not even purple anymore. Silver lining though, Michael ran away, so maybe he doesn't have to deal with him anymore. To take his mind off the dead kids that are almost certainly his own fault, and definitely his own fault, he decides to wipe the slate clean and start over again, creating a third animatronic-based restaurant, Circus Baby's Pizza World. Likes murdering kids, loves cheap Italian food. While loitering outside of Freddy Fazbear's, remembering when he had 3 alive children instead of a dead child, a soon-to-be-dead child, and a dead-to-him child, Afton notices something. That stupid puppet that Henry is so obsessed with is twitching and moving in odd ways, which he realizes means it's possessed. While stroking the mustache he probably had, Afton realizes there's actually benefits to child slaughter. He decides to build his new animatronics with the capacity to murder children on their own and store their dead bodies so he could experiment on them in his funny underground lab. He made the Funtime animatronics before Tickle Me Elmo was invented. Didn't take long either for them to murder their first kid.
Yes!
Which was one of Afton's.
No! Wait, which one?
Elizabeth.
No!
Sadly for Afton, this is America, and we treat child murder the same way we treat baseball. 3 strikes and you're out. Circus Baby's Pizza World shuts down immediately afterwards as all the fun times are shelved and stuffed into the bunker, but not before noticing that Baby was totally possessed by his now dead daughter. This dead child is the last straw for William's unnamed wife, who takes Michael and hits the bricks, which sends William spiraling even further. However, since both the puppet and Baby were possessed, it gets him thinking, if just one soul was able to possess a robot, who knows what he could do with a bunch more? Literally, who knows? He has no way of knowing how this system works, but is gonna try to make it work anyway. William proceeds to go full Metal Gear Rising on a small class's worth of children. He just slaughters a, to this day, indeterminate amount of children, anywhere between 5 and a baker's dozen. He's able to get away with all this by luring children to a back room and by using a disguise where he dresses up in a springlock suit which can be changed from animatronic to costume at the turn of a crank. If any malfunction occurs or the person wearing it thinks too hard, they are torn apart and rendered into a fine red paste. This much is proven by these two, who are probably people who died in springlock failures. Why yes, Spring Bonnie is not Toy Bonnie. No, there is no explanation. Was it too much to just get a second costume made? Springlock suits are the dumbest idea ever. The only thing dumber is children, because Afton manages to lure tons back into the storage room of Freddy Fazbear's and give them all pile drivers. He says it's to discover the secrets of Remnant, but considering the fact that there are straight up dead bodies all over the place, I'm gonna say he's gone crazy by this point. The puppet, understandably miffed after having been killed and seeing the same guy running around doing it again, decides to revive, at least some of the children into the crew of animatronics left lying around after a rebranding. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Spring Freddy, or Golden Freddy, would get stuffed with dead kids and, until the place reopened, would just sort of sit around in the back. Meanwhile, Afton starts to get a little antsy knowing that Baby's stuck down in his bunker and decides to bust her out. I mean, he's not gonna do it himself, he's busy, got places to be, children to murder, so he's gotta get somebody else to do it. Now, the contacts left in his phone whose children he hasn't murdered is getting pretty small, so he really only has one option left. He wants Michael to go down there and get Baby out, since he actually likes that kid. Michael's so traumatized by this point that the promise of some sort of paternal love gets him up and into that hole quick as a whippet. Between murdering his only daughter and now, William Afton also managed to make a robotics company that would rent out the fun times to various locations for birthday parties, and presumably eat even more children. Let's just chalk up William's kill count as every child on planet Earth until we can determine otherwise. So Michael gets down into the bunker and plays WarioWare with the robots for a few nights until they get bored of not killing him and fix that. I'm not sure if the other fun times are possessed or not. I've always just worked under the assumption that on top of state-of-the-art robotics, Afton was also able to make sentient machines. Regardless of if there's a dead kid inside them or not, the fun times, Baby, Ballora, Foxy, and Freddy lure Michael into a scooping room where they rip out all of his guts in order to pilot him like a fleshy Gundam.
He walking down the street, all his neighbors outside waving to his ass. What's up, Mike? What's up, Michael? Hey. They right the next day, he looks a little green. Next day, look. next, oh my God.
After a while, Ennard, as they now call themselves, forces Michael to vomit them up so they can escape into the sewers. Then, because of Remnant and Baby's boo-boo kisses, Michael spends 3 bars of supers to resurrect and is now alive again. Keep in mind that he is missing almost all of his internal organs as they were ripped out of him and will now go on for the next half century as a man with purple skin and the scent of death. Michael swears to find his father after all the nonsense he just got put through and hopefully kill him. This leads us to Five Nights at Freddy's 2. While Michael's been busy getting turbo-fucked by animatronics in William's bunker, Freddy's itself has seen a brand new wave of success thanks to the toy animatronics, except for Mangle, who is garbage that they keep in a room for kids to rip apart. This is also the same location where the puppets stuffed all those kids into those animatronics, so keep that in mind. Michael decides this is the perfect place to start looking for his deadbeat dad so he can give him a choke slam for once. Except William isn't there, he's in prison. On what charges? Back with Afton, after powerbombing a few more children and kicking a dog to death with his car, he ends up getting sloppy and is caught in the middle of all the child murdering. They don't quite know how he did it, but by night 6, they totally know he was using the spring Bonnie suit they had saved in the back. All the animatronics realize that he had been there the entire time and start going haywire, which leads to Mangle getting startled and biting somebody at the birthday party the next day. Now this is the bite of 1987, the infamous bite of 87. What's the significance? Who was it inflicted upon? Why have we cared about this story detail for the past 9 real years? God, I wish I knew. Oh, and as for Fritz Smith being the guy who handles custom night, it's just Michael and a mustache dude, keep up. So Afton's in jail, Michael's running around as a zombie, and Elizabeth is having issues. See, she's part of the super clique known as Ennard, but the rest of Ennard is having some real issues with her. Bringing Michael back was a big no-no since they wanted him dead, and Baby suffers for it by getting kicked out of the group. Now a large amount of time passes as we get to Five Nights at Freddy's 1. Hey everybody, welcome to the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. How are you doing?
Shut up!
So Fazbear Entertainment has taken whatever they can of the previous animatronics that don't visibly have blood on their hands and have spit-shined them for a new generation. Now, since the withered animatronics are the basic animatronics, that means that fixing them up involved looking inside of them, seeing the ooey gooey years old child guts and saying, damn, that sucks. And then closing them back up and sending them out to dance. Hit the yoinky sploinky, Freddy. It doesn't matter if you didn't get a childhood. So despite being the first game in the entire series, timeline-wise, this thing is worthless. Nothing of any note happens in the game itself, in its Easter eggs, in anything. Sure, the phone guy dies, but that's just the vaunted some guy who happened to work at Freddy's for a long time. The most interesting thing to go over is why everybody hates Michael so much. Fun times on site. site, wizards on site, toys on site. Why do all these animatronics want to beat him up? Simple, really. He's William Afton's son, and in the warped minds of tormented spirits, it's pretty likely they'll mistake him for the genuine article, seeing as he's a blood relative. Oh, and just to make it clear, Michael is physically purple, William's just morally purple. So after getting fired over smelling bad because we're a corpse, William manages to get out of jail and is eager to get back to work on the whole remnant thing. However, he's kind of out of remnant sources by this point. The only place left is in the basic animatronics. So once the place is shut down again, Afton worms his way back in and manages to disassemble the animatronics one by one. This is where a lot of people try to peg Sister Location as happening post FNAF 1 since he's using their remnant for the fun times, except he never really gets that far. I don't think he's gonna go back night after night and risk being caught doing more crimes, so he's gonna do it all in one trip. And if that trip ends with him getting murdered, he's not gonna have a chance to bring it back to his lab and make a bunch more animatronics out of it. We know that Baby had to have been made early on so it could kill his kid, so it only makes sense the rest would be made around the same time. There's just no way to make it make sense, but there's no way to make Sister Location make sense, so all's fair there. Besides, why would he go back there for the 5th night if he got everything he needed from the other 4 animatronics? Is he just gonna piss on some stuff out of spite? His plan works dandy until he's finally cornered by the ghosts of all the children as they jump Afton as he's cornered trying to collect all the remnant. He has a really good idea of hiding in the Springlock suit. No, I mean it. Only problem was he put the whole suit on, which forcibly acupunctures him to not death. This jerk manages to stay alive through sheer force of Violet for the next 30 years! 30 years pass before anybody finds this guy, a guy who was convicted for child murder. And when they do find him, you know who does it? The least important voiced character of the whole franchise. Let's rewind a bit. If we want to be fair, this 30-year time gap is more likely when Baby got kicked out of Ennard, but I wanted to put it earlier so I could see what it feels like to be wrong, which I haven't been at any point previously in this or any video. Oh, and if you think that Sister Location should go here instead of all the way back in the past, no, I do too, but it doesn't make much more sense. Michael has been blowing bubbles with his spit for 30 years, but when news of a new Fazbear attraction opening reaches him, you know he was in there like a rat up a drain pipe. Fazbear Frights is that one local fair that has a John Wayne Gacy-themed escape room that gets national coverage for how bad taste it is. The attraction sucks because they forgot to get an animatronic before they opened it, but luckily they were able to find one and didn't even have to worry about the obvious corpse inside. Remember when I said that FNAF people can't see a corpse even if it's spitting in their face? Well, aside from Michael being walking, talking proof of that, Springtrap is housing William Afton's probably dead body, and now he's trying to run you down because you just have such a hateable face. On top of that, you're attacked the whole night by illusions of old animatronics that show up when you're low on oxygen. This is kind of the reason I said Michael has to be the guard in FNAF 2 but still be a corpse, because he hallucinates exclusively FNAF 2 characters, save for Chica, so he has to have an idea of what Mangle, Balloon Boy, Puppet, and the Wizards look like. I really wanted to put FNAF 2 in a pre-Sister Location time frame so that you could have William calling Michael to go to the bunker from prison, but would you have guessed that Sister Location made my life harder? So Michael decides the only way to keep his old man down is with pyromania, as he uses the building's faulty wiring as an excuse to torch the place and kill his dad. This doesn't work, and according to this useless book I bought, it transforms him into Dark Springtrap. Dark Springtrap is Springtrap, seconds before collapsing, you see. Springtrap ain't the only one kicking around here, since over the course of the nights you can do mini-games that help free the souls of the 5 dead kids that anybody actually cares to name. Can somebody explain what I'm doing exactly? The fact I'm actively doing something to help means that I'm freeing the kids' souls on purpose, but I can't figure out how hitting the wall like a number pad and touching plush animals helps, but as long as the children rest in peace, I'll help. I'm just joking, nobody involved in FNAF will ever know peace. Now, someone who has been woefully absent from the story as long as you don't count FNAF World, and don't count FNAF World, dummy, is Henry. If you do count FNAF World, Henry is fucking dead. Well, it turns out that he's been hatching a plan in the background. It starts out with a new animatronic named Lefty, who was designed to capture and contain the puppet. It's basically a modified Rockstar Freddy with a microphone that plays the same music as the music box from FNAF 2 to keep his daughter calm while she's trapped. Oh yeah, by the way, the rock stars aren't haunted, they're just having fun. Part 2 of the plan is collecting all of Afton's old blueprints so he can engineer a way to get the spirits out of the animatronics. Turns out Michael was on the right path, as fire is the perfect thing to do it. Final step of the plan was to build a brand new pizzeria and hire some schmuck to maintain it until everybody he's after congregates in one place. This leads into Pizzeria Simulator, where Michael throws himself at another Freddy's location in an attempt to finally super kick his stupid dad. Michael wasn't supposed to get the job, but whatever, he probably needs to die too. Over the course of the nights, Henry instructs you to salvage animatronics he needs, including Scrap Baby, the result of Baby having to rough it on her own for anywhere from 5 to 30 years, Molten Freddy, Worse Ennard, Lefty, the thing I mentioned earlier, and Scrap Trap. Yep. So, at some point between achieving Dark Springtrap and falling over dead a few seconds later, William opened up his suit and dumped his remains into a newer, even shittier rabbit suit. Those remains, by the way, were little more than a head, a few rotting ligaments, and his bone lungs, which now hop around in a walking junkyard. Night after night, Michael releases more of these things into the pizzeria he's looking after until Henry reveals not only is he also in the building, but that it's about to go up in flames. He apologizes to everybody for what he has to do and hopes that this will finally give them peace. Except for Afton, he really wants him to go to hell. And go to hell he does! Not. I have been on the side of Ultimate Custom Night being William Afton in hell ever since the game came out. It just lines up too well, but to make anything else make sense, we have to say that Golden Freddy is keeping him in a nightmare coma, which is stupid, but whatever. Oh, trust me, you haven't seen stupid yet. Afton gets rug burns and wet willies from animatronics for the rest of time, and that's the end of the Five Nights at Freddy's storyline. For now. Now that we're all on the same page for where my gripes with these games come from, it's time to get a little more into the nitty-gritty of what I take umbrage with. But talking about Five Nights at Freddy's so much is enough to make anybody want to quit. So to counterbalance, I'm gonna do something I enjoy. Yeah, I'm making a pizza. And just like my theory crafting, my pizza making is not up for scrutiny. So a bunch of people are probably fuming over the timeline I've just put together. And rightly so, I'm probably wrong. I mean, it's common knowledge at this point that the crying child from Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is actually a very young William Afton and the game takes place in 1883. It's just that simple. Alright, let's try this one on for size. Put sister location anywhere on the timeline and make it make sense. You can't. Guess why? Because nobody can. When I was buying this worthless paperweight made of paper, people were telling me, no. Here's a perfect comprehensive timeline for Five Nights at Freddy's. And you want to know where they put the events of sister location? Nowhere. Even the most community-trusted sources don't know where this game goes. Sister Location was partially made as a response to the idea that Five Nights at Freddy's had gotten too samey, and so threw out almost all the pre-established iconography to make a whole new location and story. Now that story ended up being the exact same story before we even got to the start screen, but whatever. That new setting though created so many problems, namely the fun times. Funtime animatronics have endoskeletons that are made of wires instead of regular steel, have the ability to replicate human voices, dispense ice cream, murder children, all of this, and they existed back in the 80s. Not just at any point in the 80s though, these things existed at a point before the next most technologically advanced animatronics, the toys. The technology of Sister Location being so advanced makes sense for the 5th entry in the series, but not for where it may or may not end up on the timeline. Regardless of if you think Sister Location happens before 2, after 1, during 4, Baby existing means the technology has to have been made somewhere in the 80s. I say the game takes place around FNAF 2, but even then, I'm not satisfied with that answer since it places the technology so early on. But let's say that the fun times are constructed in a more technologically advanced time. Yeah, the early 90s. That means the game has to happen before Afton gets got by ghosts because otherwise he wouldn't have been able to call Michael. And let's say that he does get all of his remnant, make the fun times, and go back to get his dick smashed. This still means it happens around 1993. We're still in a pre-Bop It world! Ultimately, you can put this game wherever you want on the timeline and get the same results. It makes some things make sense, but it's not perfect. It's not just the fun times though, everything about Sister Location launches the series into a direction it never recovered from. FNAF suddenly went from an intimate and gross story about a killer hacking his way through a preschool's worth of children into a science fiction story. That's most obviously seen in Remnant. Has anything ever not gotten over as much as Remnant? No one likes it, and moreover, no one seems to understand it. I've asked multiple people with an encyclopedic knowledge of FNAF a simple question. Can you carry Remnant in a bucket? And everybody has given me a different exasperated grunt as an answer. The best it's been described to me is that it's intense emotion, a human soul, and metal all mixed together, which leads to possession. I get why something like Remnant was introduced, because the longer the series went on, the more popular it got with children, and the more popular it gets with children, the harder it is to reckon with the fact that the mascots are filled with child corpses. Remnant fixes that, but in explaining how it works down to a science, it stops being interesting. You don't need to explain ghosts. Remnant just feels like an explanation that nobody asked for, which is more complicated than anybody wanted. That science also circles back around to William Afton. In a pre-sister location world, Afton was a psychotic child murderer with loosely defined motives, which honestly made him scarier. The fear of the unknown will always endure, and having no idea why someone's doing the things they're doing makes them the best type of unpredictable. Sister location made him Dr. Wily. He's building murder robots because killing children gets boring and he had to outsource it. And instead of doing what he's doing because he's a horrible monster, now he's a horrible monster who's doing it so he can experiment with Remnant in order to... Okay, some people say bring his children back, but that's far too noble a goal for somebody who's on child murder number 12. Even all this time later, so deep into the series, no one can really tell you what Afton's goal is. We know why he started killing kids, but he clearly has a new goal ever since he started collecting Remnant. We just don't know what it is. And unlike before, where explaining him made him less scary, explaining this would make him less ridiculous. Just because you reveal a killer's motives doesn't automatically mean he's not scary, but there's an irreversible shift that a character takes when their motivations go from because I enjoy murdering children to I want to become immortal. You go from serial killer scary to Skeletor scary. William Afton just isn't scary or interesting anymore, and as the series goes on, he goes from scary to stupid to outright laughable. When we saw the trailer for Five Nights at Freddy's 3 that says he always comes back, that wasn't a stinger, that was a threat. FNAF 3 Springtrap to FNAF 6 Scrap Trap is such a fall from grace that just gets worse and worse every time you see what latest summer fashion he's modeling. So it may sound like I'm just harping on Sister Location because it's the worst one, but what about the rest of the series? Well, across all the other games, I don't really have as much to talk about since the cracks really started showing in Sister Location, and Pizzeria Simulator did its best to spackle those cracks. But that doesn't mean I don't have a few other smaller complaints. Welcome to our brand new reoccurring segment, things in FNAF that were set up as big deals but don't mean crap. Number 1, Chica is a goddamn liar. I have a theory that whichever child possessed Chica is a compulsive fibber because every time she opens her squawk hole, something dumb happens. Exhibit A, what's going on with Chica's beak in Five Nights at Freddy's 4? During a Game Theory livestream, Scott started updating his website with cryptic messages to respond to the stream, including such statements as 4 games, 1 story. Yeah, I sure hope it would be. One of the messages posited, why was Chica missing her beak in the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 minigame? What could that possibly mean? It means that her beak, it comes off. Fast forward to Ultimate Custom Night, and with her Chica decides to throw out the haymaker that she was the first and has seen everything. Oh, so the kid stuffed inside Chica was the first one that Afton killed. Okay, that's wrong. The puppet is the first one that he kills because that's the one that stuffs them in the Chica suit. Unless this is the animatronic Chica talking about how she was the first one built, but that's not something that any possessed animatronic does throughout the entire franchise. But like I said, lies come so naturally to this devil bird's forked tongue. The bite of 87. The fandom worked itself up into a right tizzy over this one, trying to figure out who it was and when it happened, what it means and how it relates to the larger story. To answer those questions in order, Mangle 1987, nothing and it doesn't. And what about that box? If I'm being honest, I have no idea what to even say about the box that hasn't been said before. The series has evolved so far past the box that bringing it up as irrelevant feels irrelevant. We can also get up in arms about how Mangle's arm clips into the vents in FNAF 2, but both feel just about as relevant as the other. I think it's best to copy Scott on this one and just forget the box ever happened. Now, if the series ended where it should have ended, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. We'd be playing open season on GameCube like God intended. If we were only so lucky. So Ultimate Custom Night was the perfect love letter to the franchise, having all the animatronics, locations, Easter egg, lying birds, and most importantly, William Afton in hell. I mean, Henry says as much in Pizzeria Simulator, Old Man Consequences says leave the demon to his demons, all signs point down, but no. Golden Freddy, the selfish prick, has decided they're the one who should not have been killed and has conscripted the rest of the dead kids to torment William Afton in a never-ending nightmare. That's all well and good until eventually Fazbear Entertainment finds the Pizzeria Simulator location and collects bits of Scrap Trap. Since Willy's remnant is all over the stuff, he manages to possess individual pieces of the Scrap Trap suit. Fazbear Entertainment wants all this junk because they're gonna use it to create a VR game to clear their public image. Things are about to get real sloppy real quick when it comes to the distinction between Five Nights at Freddy's the video game and Five Nights at Freddy's the in-universe video game. See, Fazbear is well aware of their status as an assisted suicide facility and is making strides to cover it up. That status is thanks to rumors that have been perpetuated by a rogue game developer who created the Five Nights at Freddy's games in both our universe and the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. Does that make sense? The correct answer is no. In order to fight back against these allegations and present the real story, Fazbear Entertainment is creating a video game all about reliving all the horrible things that have happened at their restaurants. The phrase "too stupid to live" comes to mind. So the team making FNAF VR in FNAF VR were under a tight budget and very strict constraints. In order to cut corners, they end up using code and technology from the original Scrap Trap suit to help code an actual murderer into the game. Oh, Slick Willy's back at it again, but he's still stuck inside the computer. I think it's important to mention how Golden Freddy's plan of keeping William Afton trapped in hell forever failed, and how this cutscene is not Golden Freddy twitching off into the darkness. No, this is William Afton flipping the double bird as he moonwalks out of hell and leaves dozens of souls not laid to rest. The first 5 dead kids, the second 5 dead kids, Charlotte, Michael, Crying Child, Funny Frog, all left to rot. So Afton's back to suplexing kids, but only in Fortnite. He's gotta find a way to become a real boy again. That's when game tester Jeremy comes into the picture. Afton's new alter ego Glitch Trap starts to appear to Jeremy every time he plays the game, becoming more and more real every time he sees him. Jer Bear realizes that something real spooky's going on and tries to tell everybody, but since they're all under such a crunch, they decide to ignore him. That's when fellow playtester Vanessa finds Jeremy having factory reset himself in the supply closet with a paper cutter. Vanessa goes to tell her higher-ups that the game is haunted as fuck, only to find them already trying to cover up the fact that Jeremy died. If that wasn't bad enough, it turns out the rogue game developer was actually somebody who worked for Fazbear's, and the game served as a way to make all the deaths look like hoaxes. Since Jeremy died, that leaves Vanessa as the only person left who can test the game. She really doesn't want to do it, but with the job market being the way it is, she decides it's better to work for a murderer than to work for Bass Pro. Eventually, though, Glitch Trap is able to escape the game in Vanessa's head. First order of business is get this girl a bunny suit. She's like the daughter he never had. For very long. So thanks to the success of FNAF VR and FNAF AR, which is a phone game, and I'm not letting Freddy Fazbear know where I live, Fazbear Entertainment is back in the green. Now they've got so much money they can afford to open an entire pizzaplex for the franchise's big return. A return that Vanessa is incredibly interested in, as she gets a job as a night guard for all the good work she did as a tester. Within the next week, 9 more children go missing. Vanessa tries to get therapy to get the bunny man out of her head, but as soon soon as somebody gets too close to figuring out that she has lost her marbles, Afton has her kill them. Unlike Vanessa's rapidly deteriorating mental state, though, the Pizzaplex is doing good, as they have a brand new band featuring Freddy and Chica, as well as newcomers Roxy and Montgomery. There used to be a Bonnie too, but the AI used in these things is so advanced that it can get jealous, as Montgomery beat Bonnie to death to take his spot in the band. That's never directly stated in-game, but it's dumb enough for me to want to mention. Things are going about as terrible as they usually do until Freddy shuts down in the middle of a performance on stage. He reboots in safe mode and is pregnant with Gregory, a small child. In a book, it's implied that he's working with Vanessa and betrayed her just like Rick the Model Martel did to Tito Santana at WrestleMania 5. If your brain didn't shut down as soon as I said book and start back up when I said Tito Santana, you're not using your brain right. So because child murder is lame, Gregory decides to put a stop to it and rides around in Freddy since it's the first time you can be inside of an animatronic without having been murdered. From there, security breach happens, and in the ending, no not that one, Freddy and Greggy descend into the bowels of the Pizzaplex after having defeated every other animatronic and stealing their parts. What did I say about this just being Mega Man? Going deeper and deeper, and we get the basement of bad ideas, like how the Pizzaplex was built on top of the Pizzeria Simulator location, there's a giant blob of all the other animatronics, and William Afton manages to resurrect himself. Oh, I know someone's gonna bring it up, so let's just nip this in the bud. Technically, it's an AI reconstruction of Afton possessing his dead body. I also ate all my vegetables and mowed the lawn, Dad. The ending shows that Henry don't know nothing about nothing because I burned this man down to his protons and he's still kicking. After setting the whole place on fire, the Blob comes back and attempts to kill Afton, but his spirit manages to overpower it as he takes control of the Blob. That hasn't happened yet, but I'm so certain it will, I'll treat it as fact. There's been no worthwhile addition to this franchise since 2017. Okay, let's get the big one out of the way first. They took the best part of all of these games, the ending to FNAF 6, and ruined it. Pizzeria Simulator's ending is one of finality and acceptance, casting everything into fire and burning the whole of the character's misery into ash. Let's count where everybody actually ended up. Charlotte, who was the puppet, is currently suffering in the afterlife because her killer is still running free. Elizabeth, depending on how much of her is left in the charred remains of Baby, is currently stuck inside of the Blob. Molten Freddy, who was just a mess of wires in a robot mask, makes up the majority of the Blob. And Henry's grand plan to kill Afton failed. The only person he managed to kill was himself! And of course, William Afton is back, which means that all the good work that was done in Pizzeria Simulator to end things was undone. This was when I finally quit FNAF cold turkey. What was the point of staying invested if Afton's just gonna keep coming back over and over like Bowser? And since Afton's a walking go-away heat magnet, that dragged down an actually interesting character by osmosis. Doing the research necessary for this video actually gave me a real appreciation for Vanessa as a character. She's complicated, tragic, and most of all feels real. None of that really matters though when the series just positions her as Afton's grunt. Instead of letting a new villain shepherd the franchise for a little bit, they fell back into Afton's arms as soon as they let him go. I think it would be a lot more interesting if instead of being possessed by William Afton, she was just inspired by the myth that Fazbear Entertainment is perpetuating by making the VR game. It's not unrealistic to say that someone was inspired by a serial killer, and it throws the blame back on Fazbear for keeping William alive, not through magic mumbo-jumbo, but because they won't let his story go. But the problems with Vanessa extend way further than what I've just said, and that leads us to Vani. For the years and years leading up to Security Breach, the developers would egg fans on by saying, "Who is this Vani character?" It's Vanessa. She's stalking the Pizzaplex, who could it be? It could be Vanessa, because it is. Who knows who this madman could be? We could, if you told us it was Vanessa. Because it is. Let me be a nerd for a second and compare this to another disappointment, Batman Arkham Knight. In the game's marketing, they hyped up the Arkham Knight as a brand new character with info on Batman and a bone to pick. 20 seconds after the character's reveal, and people said, yeah, it's probably Jason Todd. Despite that, the devs denied it up until the game's release, where, surprise, it's Jason Todd. Who could have guessed? Well, me, my friend Owen, the guy at McDonald's, and everybody else on planet Earth. Mysteries like this, where the answer is so obvious, are inherently frustrating, because while the game treats it like it's a grand reveal, you solved the puzzle hours ago. The reveal itself is all the more unsatisfying because You really think we couldn't figure this one out? All right, Poindexter, you make the equation make sense. Instead of building up a twist that wouldn't have fooled a 5-year-old, you could have spent more time developing both sides of Vanessa. Not that you would have had much time considering she's a non-factor in her own debut game. Oh, but FNAF has traumatized us all to the point that an answer so simple couldn't possibly be correct, and people have devised any and all theory to deny the most obvious answer the series has ever given. She's a robot, she has a twin sister, she's the reincarnation of Elizabeth, which is the worst one. All of these are attempts to make mountains out of molehills. Well, why isn't there blood when Freddy spears Vani off the top of the Pizzaplex? Because the game is rated T and you can't have her explode into viscera and still make Funko Pops of it. I honestly can't believe this is an argument that happens. It feels so pointless, especially when you have so much else to complain about. How do you build a mall on top of an intact, burnt-down pizzeria? Better question, how does a pizzeria burn into the ground? That's not even a thematic problem, it's more a that's not how fire works problem. If it's a sinkhole, why would you build a mall on top of a sinkhole? We also rigged the foundation to explode just in case. I'm sorry, but Fazbear Entertainment still being around is way past unreasonable. Action Park had like 5 people die at it, and now it's a synonym for death. Fazbear's has had at least a baker's dozen worth of child murders and employees getting ripped in half like phone books, and they keep coming back. What the hell is the Blob? Remnant? I really hope that Freddy isn't possessed by Michael. The game hardcore implies that when Freddy gets to the FNAF 6 location because it's where his charred dead body is. But imagine what a spit in the eye it would be if this poor guy was a zombie for 40 years and then finally got to rest, he wakes up and realizes,
What the hell? I'm not even Foxy.
Moreover, a lot of people say that Gregory and Vanessa are robot versions of Elizabeth and the Crying Child, which means that the 3 main characters are just a big old Afton jamboree. Afton trying to sculpt Vanessa into Elizabeth is a lot more interesting, but people are convinced there's not a single human character in this entire franchise. As for Gregory, I don't know if this evidence is permissible in court, Your Honor, but there's cut dialogue that shows instead of Freddy saying Gregory is broken, he says that he's bleeding. Everybody points to this line as proof that Gregory is a robot, but that clearly wasn't the original intention. And if you think that going off cut dialogue isn't fair, we've been doing this since FNAF 2. We know that going into the source files is a way to find out information. How is Afton in better shape now after being burned to death? Twice? I know you can say Vani used Bonnie parts to fix him up, but why does he still look like garbage? Did Vani accidentally set the parts on fire before using them, or was that on purpose to make it feel more like home? If Afton can infect whatever machine he wants, why does he want his old body back? It's a shambling corpse. Why not get somebody with working joints? Why does the daycare attendant have a murder mode? You can levy all the criticism you want against Security Breach for its gameplay or lack of polish, but for me, the story is what I come to a FNAF game for above all else. Not only is this game's a mess, I know that going forward it's only gonna get worse. I have never felt less excited to be a fan of this franchise, and I hope that the developers can make something good out of the upcoming DLC. They've shown they can make good, new, original content in Vanessa, and I wish they would go more in that direction instead of falling back to what worked before. I hope this series can find what made it so good in the first place, and if it can't, I hope the people that enjoy the new stuff can enjoy more of it. If it's not for me anymore, that's fine. Alright guys, brand new challenge. If we can get to 1 view on this video, I'll never talk about FNAF again.